Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Belgium once again for the first time in what feels like absolutely ages. At this point in time, I honestly couldn't tell you what the last Belgian beer I reviewed on the channel was, but that is something we do need to fix on the channel going forward. You will see some more Belgian reviews more frequently on the channel as we go on. But the beer we're going to have a look at today comes from a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. These guys are potentially one of the most recognisable Belgian craft beer brands, and the beer is a style that I think we have had before, if memory serves me correctly, but it's one of their more kind of special and unusual releases actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Helle, which is to the southeast of Ghent in Oost-Vlaanderen, or East Flanders, in the kind of, I guess you could say the sort of northwestern part of Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. But we're going to have a look at another beer from Brouwerij Huyghe, who of course are very well known for their Delirium range. So this particular beer is the Delirium Blond barrel-aged edition. So yeah, this one comes in at 11.5% ABV. It is a little bit of a monster, and we got this one through Systembolaget here in Sweden back in March of 2022, if memory serves me correctly. So yeah, this one should be really quite interesting. I've had my eye on this beer for a wee while, but this year I thought, you know, bugger it, let's just have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. We do have the dark one to review for you at some point in the future as well, and I should point out that these both are the 2022 edition, so I'm not sure exactly when they were released in 2022, or if they're yearly releases, or if they, you know, do them every so often and things, but yeah, I think I really just wanted to try them this year, and they were quite cheap through Systembolaget as well actually, which was nice. But yeah, the Delirium Blond Barrel Aged Edition, 11.5% ABV from Brouwerij Huyghe in Helle in Belgium. Let's crack on with this one and see what it's all about. Nice to return to these guys as well after what has been a very, very long time actually. I can't remember when the last review I did from these guys actually was, maybe 2018 or something like that. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, however, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brouwerij Huyghe before, and their Delirium range, and we will no doubt add more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this beer in the Belgian playlist along with many other things, and that will of course be added to as time goes on. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. First off then, to my brewery notes, to tell you a little bit about Brouwerij Huyghe, and I will apologise in advance for any bad French or Flemish pronunciations. These are languages I'm not really all that familiar with. But anyway, Brouwerij Huyghe are based in Helle, which is a small township to the southeast of Ghent in East Flanders, Oost-Vlaanderen, down in Belgium. It's kind of in the northwestern part of the country, as I mentioned earlier. But the brewery building in which these guys are located is known as the Appelhoek, and this has apparently been the site of a brewery since 1654. But in 1902, Leon Huyghe arrived in Helle with his wife Delvina van Dorselaer, and she was the daughter of a brewer. But a few years later on, in 1906, he bought the brewery and named it Brouwerij Muiterij van Appel. But after the First World War, or during the First World War I should say, the occupying Germans took the copper kettles from the brewery, and these had to be replaced very quickly after the end of the war. But from 1936 to 1939, the construction of a new brewery complex took place on Gerard Bergsteinweg, which is still today the home of the main brewing hall for Brouwerij Huyghe. But from then until the mid-1980s, the brewery was actually producing German-style beers, but the brewery business was radically reformed in 1985, and it returned to top fermented Belgian-style beers under the third-generation owners. This was Anita Huyghe and then Jean de Leert, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But over the years following this, during the years following this, I need to fix my English in these videos, but the brewery acquired a few other small breweries, and this included the Artevelde Grand Cru, Biertoren, Dam in the Netherlands, and also Wielers. And then in 1992, Jean and Anita's son Alain took over the running of the company, and they've continued to expand under his guidance. These days they employ around 50 people, and they're brewing around 200,000 hectolitres of beer per year. So that's about 20 million litres, which is pretty damn impressive. But the beers that the overall company Brouwerij Huyghe produce include the Delirium range, La Guillotine, Averbode, Floris, Campus, St. Idesbad, Blanche de Liège, Mongozo, Artevelde, and also the Wielers ones as well. But the 6 Delirium beers are the Tremens, the Nocturnum, the Christmas, the Red, Argentum, and Deliria, and of course they have the different barrel-aged ones as well, and this is one of them. I think they've only released 2 barrel-aged beers, if memory serves me correctly, but there's different vintages, of course, that you can check out. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Brouwerij Huyghe. I kind of, in the grand scheme of Belgian brewing, a little bit of a more modern brand, I guess we could say, and kind of interesting when you think about it that the kind of more modern Belgian style beers have only been produced from these guys again since 1985. So yeah, only about 40 years old, which is quite interesting. But yeah, as I say, that's everything we can say about these guys. If you want to learn a little bit more about Brouwerij Huyghe and the Delirium brand, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a little taste of this beer then and see what it's all about. So, as we mentioned earlier, this one is an 11.5% Belgian Golden Ale, Belgian Strong Golden Ale, I guess we could say. You could see this one has the nice kind of golden elephant on it there. All the barrel-aged beers are kind of released in similar bottles to this, but the main difference between this one and the black beer is the kind of top label. So the black label is actually a little bit different to this, which you'll see in a few videos' time. But this one has a kind of sort of champagne bottle top to it, but 750 millilitres this one. I honestly can't remember how much this one actually cost. I think it might have been somewhere in the region of like 170 or 180 kroner. So that translates to, let's say it was 170, it was about 100, it was about 17 euros, about £15 sterling, somewhere in the region of like, you know, 18, 19 American dollars, something like that. But 11.5%, as we said, this is a good bottle for sharing, which is exactly what I'm going to do once I'm finished making this video. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. The Delirium Blond Barrel Aged, 11.5% ABV. Let's do this. Hopefully this isn't too difficult a beer to actually get open. So yeah, there you are. Oh, and you can see the elephant is actually on the little paper there. So yeah, there you are. But yeah, let's get this guy open and see what we have. Yeah, so it's one of these nice little unwindy tops there. Nothing really special about this thing, nothing about the Delirium or whatever on top of that, but they do, I can see there's a few things on the cork. So let's get this guy actually open. See, so nice wee bit of smoke on the opening there, which I believe you can see. But let's put some of this out into the glass and see what we have. Yeah, pretty much kind of what you would expect, but we'll be careful with it because remember, Belgian beer quite often does ferment again in the bottle. It's got secondary fermentation a lot of the time. So I think that's enough to just take a little look at the beer for the moment. So anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from any kind of Belgian blonde, be it a regular blonde or a more kind of strong Belgian blonde. You can see the head on this one's a bit of a weird shape. It's kind of lopsided if you look at it. It's a bit taller on my right than it is on the left. I've never seen that in a beer before, so yeah, that's pretty unusual. But yeah, anyway, you can see the beer is poured with, I think I've only poured about just a bit over maybe about 300 mils, something like that. But yeah, you can see this beer is poured with more than a head of a frothy, I would say kind of perfect white head. You can see there's some big bubbles toward the bottom of the head there, and a few fluffier ones just sitting further up. And you can see the beer itself. This one's actually a lot more of a kind of rich, darker, golden colour. But lots of visible carbonation. I'm not sure how well you guys are going to see that on the camera there. Maybe if I put my hand behind it, you can see it a little bit more. But there's a big steady stream of carbonation visible in this one. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, when it comes to the this blonde beer, I haven't had too many barrel aged blonde beers, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of curious as to whether the slightly darker blonde colour that this beer has is due just to the type of malts that have been used, or whether it is actually a product of the barrel aging. I honestly don't know. But yeah, it certainly looks very nice, and a more kind of rich, amber leaning Belgian blonde beer, this one actually. Looks very, very cool. Yeah, I don't know if we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this one, other than that it is kind of crystal clear, but yeah, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma and see what this beer is all about. Oh yeah, straight away I can tell you it smells pretty damn nice. Yeah. Now, one of the things you always have to remember about Belgian beers, and this is why you get part of the big head on these, one of the things with Belgian beers is that they're a little bit more yeast focused, of course, and they're always a bit higher in alcohol, but they put a bit of brew sugar in them, and that's why you get the light mouthfeel, but with lots of carbonation and lots of foam and stuff like that. So that's that's definitely worth kind of bearing in mind with this one. But yeah, aroma wise, I have to say this is pretty damn nice. On the straight away with this one, you get everything you'd expect of the Belgian blonde. You get a little bit of oily fruit, you get a little bit of a kind of hoppy character to it, and you also get the nice kind of big oily sweetness. And obviously with this one being a barrel aged blonde beer, you're getting a little bit more woodiness and stuff out of this one. You've also got the kind of candied sugars coming out of the beer. But let's just go into the aroma a little bit more, delve into it, and break it down a wee bit more. So yeah, for me, backbone of this beer, and I'd be curious to know what barrel they've used for this one, if it's a bourbon barrel or exactly what it is. But yeah, I think it is, just going by the aroma, to be honest with you. The other thing might be a cognac barrel. But yeah, it didn't say anything about that on the Untappd page, actually. Let's just see. We'll just have a wee look. I'm pretty sure it didn't. Let me just bring that back up. It just says, yeah, it just said oak, bourbon oak barrels. I was right. So yeah, aged in bourbon oak barrels for 9 months. I should have written that down in the brewery notes, actually. But yeah, the backbone of this one is the backbone of this one. We can turn that off now. Actually, we don't need it. The backbone in this beer, you've got that lovely smooth American oaky character to this one. And as I've always said in videos before, for me, American oak is a lot smoother than European oak. I would say European oak's got a little bit more dryness to it. Different species of tree. I quite often say this when it comes to reviewing these big bottled beers, because many of them are barrel aged. But yeah, lovely smooth American oaky character in there. Wee touch of vanilla, as you're always going to get as well. But then you can smell little elements of the bourbon spirit. And as I say, this is quite unusual to find a blonde beer that is that's barrel aged, so that makes it quite exciting actually. And this is what you want after 3,000 odd beer reviews. You want things that are going to make you think a wee bit. So yeah, smooth American oak, lovely little bit of a kind of bourbon brown sugary layer to it, a bit of vanilla in there, and then you start to get the nice Belgian blonde characteristics coming out of this one. So you've got a wee bit of like a kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. You've certainly got that. Above that you get a little touch of a kind of wholemeal, slightly brown bready character in there, but it's got quite a little bit of sweetness. It's almost like an almost brandy soaked bread or something like that. Then you get the white bready character in there, and above that you start to get the brown sugars out of the beer. So for me, it's quite biscuity actually. It's like a kind of caramelised McVitie's digestive biscuity note that comes out of this one. There's definitely a little bit of straight up caramel in there, but it has got an element of a more kind of honey note to it, and it's almost like the honey's infused with a little bit of like pear or sultana or something like that. So yeah, definitely honey, definitely caramel, definitely McVitie's digestive biscuit. And then yeah, you've got these bready kind of notes underneath as well. So yeah, the way that these go together are really quite nice actually. There's really even a tiny little bit of nuttiness coming out of this beer toward the front of the nose. But yeah. So in terms of the hoppy component of this beer, you've definitely got a little touch of earthiness to it. You've got a little bit of herbal character, and obviously the longer you keep this beer, which you can do, the more the hoppy character is going to drop out of it. But then you've got that, but in this case we're still, I mean this is obviously about a year old, you've still got a little bit of that hoppy character there, which is going to add to the complexity. So there's a little bit of floral character to this one, there's a little bit of grassiness, and yeah, I think that just adds to the beer really nicely. But on the fruity side of things, you have quite a little bit of oily, just oiliness coming out of this one. It's really nice. You can smell the kind of candied notes to this beer from the sugar that's obviously been added into it. They usually use rock candy and things like that in Belgian beers. But yeah, for me, this one's definitely giving a little bit of a, there's a lot of kind of oily pear coming out of this one. I'm getting like sultanas, you know, dry white green grapes. There's a little bit of like a fresh green apple as well, for sure. It has got a teeny tiny little bit of an almost ready fruit to it, like a candied strawberry or something like that. There's a wee bit of that going on in this one. And dried apricots as well, I think, is definitely fair to say. And maybe a little bit of an oily pineapple. Yeah. Quite a few things coming out of this beer in that sense. But yeah, big oily fruity notes, and you get a wee bit of zestiness out of this one as well from the grassy character. But I have to just say, beautiful, beautiful aroma on this one. I could sit and smell it all day. It's like a slightly more woody and oily Belgian blonde actually. Yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one then and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the barrel aged blonde from the Delirium range by Brouwerij Huyghe in Helle, to the, yeah, just outside of Ghent in Flanders in Belgium. Beautiful smelling beer, this one. 11.5% ABV, Belgian strong golden ale, I guess we can call it. Slange, skål, cheers, prost, santé. That's very nice. Just a big kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a big sort of almost, it's almost like silky in its mouthfeel actually. Very silky, boozy blonde beer, this one. The bourbon barrel aging on this is really interesting. And this is the thing with these Belgian beers. They're so strong in alcohol, but just so easy to drink. So, yeah. as I quite often say, these beers are very capable of fucking your day in the best way. But yeah, this is lovely. I'm going to say straight away, big thumbs up to Brouwerij Huyghe for this one. Yeah, so break this beer down in the way we always do with these things. We'll start at the middle third of the palate. The backbone of the beer, you can feel that lovely, smooth American oak in there. And as you move, it gets smoother the further forward on the palate you go, so you get that lovely smooth American oak in there. You can feel a little bit of the, you can definitely feel a little bit of the kind of vanilla quality coming out toward the front of that middle third of your palate as well. And yeah, that just kind of lingers there on that front third of your palate. Then above, just behind the front third of your palate, of course. But then you have the kind of bourbon, the bourbon brown sugar layers coming out of this one, which is very, very nice. So on top of that, you have the you've got a little bit of a more the bourbon brown sugars in this one. It comes across as quite a sweet bourbon, but as I've always mentioned before, for me, American bourbon is very sweet compared to Scotch whisky, which is a little bit drier and a little bit more kind of spicy and things. But of course, it depends what region you're talking about. But yeah, above the bourbon brown sugars, you start to get the actual malty parts of the beer, I guess we could say. So in the base of that, middle third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a kind of white bread crusty sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah, a little bit of a fresh white bready bread crust in there. Above that, you have a wholemeal. You've got a little bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready bread crust in there. And then above that, you have the kind of white bready notes coming out of this one. So it's a very layered bready kind of character. And you do get a lot of as I say, Belgian beer is more yeasty focused, so you do have little elements of like a kind of banana bread and a little tiny touch of clove and stuff like this. Obviously nowhere near as much as you're going to get from like a wit beer or a German Hefeweizen or something like this, but you still get these little kind of sweeter elements to the bread in this beer. On top of the bready notes, you start to get a little bit more of the kind of brown sugary quality, so there's a wee touch of there's definitely a wee touch of the kind of brown sugary character coming out of this one, so you can feel the base layer of that brown sugary character. There's a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity quality out of this one. So yeah, there's a little bit of that McVitie's digestive biscuity quality in there, and then above that you can feel the kind of honey type notes. Then you've got a layer of like a Werther's original butter candy butterscotch, and in the dead centre of your palate there's a bit of a kind of straight up sweet caramel in there. So the brown sugary layer is very kind of the brown sugary part of this beer is very layered and kind of a little bit complex actually, which is quite interesting. So yeah, the way that goes together really is quite nice actually, and it gives the beer a little bit of a lightness as well the further into the aftertaste that you go. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. The middle third of your palate in this beer is quite interesting, but for me the really unique thing is the bourbon barrel aging in a blonde beer. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about that middle third of the palate, to be honest with you. So back third of the palate, and the back third of the palate in some ways is quite similar to the middle third. So in the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there, a little bit of brown bread, a little bit of white bread, and it still has a little bit of that kind of almost like brandy soaked, cognac soaked fruity sweetness to it. But as I always say more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, whereas the sweeter flavours come out further forward. So yeah, you've got the woody layer in there, which feels a little bit drier. You've got the bourbon sugar, the bourbon spirit brown sugar in there, which again feels a little bit drier. You've got the bread crust in there, the brown bready layer is there, but it feels a little bit taller and a bit more light and airy. Then you've got the white bready layer above that, that's there. And then above all of that, you've got a wee bit of a more kind of light, airy type quality coming out of this one. So yeah, the way this beer goes together in that sense is really, really nice. So, the yeasty side of this beer, for me, it's interesting because this beer really, I find this beer actually gets quite wet and quite oily the further into the aftertaste you go. But then above all of that, you have a little bit more of a, you've got a little bit of a more, kind of, you can feel there's like a little bit of a farmhousey bready note, a little bit of honeycomb and stuff like that. But yeah, the yeasty character in this beer is almost kind of oily in a sense, which for me is quite, it's quite interesting. But definitely, yeah, on the back third of the palate you can feel the flavour is taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. So yeah, that goes together really, really nicely in this one. Yeah, hoppy side of things then, let's go on to that. And as I've said before, this beer is barrel aged, so the hoppy character will drop out the longer you age it, which you can definitely do with this one. But yeah, back corners of the palate, you've absolutely got a little bit of a, you've got a little bit of earthiness in there, very, very smooth. As you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of your palate, there's a little bit of floral aromaticity there, and then round the front curve of the tongue, a little bit lighter and grassy. Now the thing is with this beer, because it's barrel aged, the hoppy characters in this one feel very, very smooth, because a lot of them have kind of dropped out, but what green component is there actually comes across as being very, very wet. But generally speaking, I find that Belgian hops, which I'm guessing have been used in this one, Belgian hops are almost somewhere between German and English. English hops are always a bit more earthy and herbal, German ones are a bit brighter and more kind of grassy in a sense, and Belgian beers have a little bit of everything, or Belgian hops, sorry, have a little bit of everything. So you get that from the hoppy side of this beer, actually. There's a bit of that still lingering there. But let's look at the front third of your palate then, and see how these things go together. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, look at the fruity side of things now. You get a little bit of that bready build up in there. It's like a mix of white and brown bread again with a little bit of fruity sweetness, and the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more, you've still got the smooth American oak in there. You've got the smooth American oak, you've got a little bit of the bourbon sugar, and then you've got a wee bit of that kind of bready character, and then you get the nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at these. And one thing I would say is that the sugar that they've undoubtedly added into the brew here is giving you some of these nice dry fruity notes you get. But let's break these down to round off the tasting. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer, in some ways it's a little bit more complex, but in some ways it's a little bit more kind of straightforward actually. It's got quite, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, there's quite a little bit of like an oily but dry datey note to this one. So yeah, definitely dry dates. And then as you move a bit further forward, you get a little bit of a kind of sultana, you know, dry white green grapes. A lot of oily pear in there. Absolutely lots and lots of oily pear. Then as you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue, there's maybe a teeny little bit of like an almost gooseberry type quality to this one, but I think pear, date, sultana are probably the biggest descriptors that I would use for the fruity side of this beer. That really is quite interesting how everything like that pieces together in this one, I have to say. So it gets a thumbs up. It gets a thumbs up from me in that particular sense. The fruity side of this one is really wet and oily, and I like that about this one. But you get a little bit more of a kind of dried apricot-y note out of the beer the further into the aftertaste that you go as well. Maybe a wee tiny bit of oily pineapple as well. So yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the flavour of the beer, so we can round off with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, it's full-bodied, I would say. Carbonation is very, very smooth. This beer almost has like a slightly silky mouthfeel to it, actually, and that's interesting for me because I've always found that Belgian beers just have a little bit more kind of carbonation and prickle to them. But then again, we have to remember that a lot of the Belgian beers that travel outside of Belgium will sit for a little while, and then you'll get all the carbonation build up, and sometimes they can just be over carbonated. So you have to be careful when you say these things about the Belgian stuff. But the IBUs in this beer, I think, are very, very low. It must be about 15 or something like that. Yeah, there's not a lot of IBU or bitterness to this beer. Overall, the beer is very, very smooth. In the malt base, you've got the smoothness of the wood. You've got a lovely kind of smooth bready character in there and a little bit of sweetness on top. The fruity side of this one is really nice, and it's got a bit of dry fruity character in the aftertaste, but it's quite oily up front overall. But yeah, the way everything goes together in this one, I think, is really quite nice. And yeah, I can't fault this beer at all. You know, when you get something, when you buy a Delirium beer, you expect a good quality beer, and this beer hasn't let me down in any sense of the word. So yeah, I can only say thumbs up to them for this. And it's nice to try something a wee bit more different, and definitely cool to try a kind of barrel-aged blonde beer as well. You really don't come across these all that often. Maybe they are a little bit more common with some of the stronger Belgian things, so that's something I will need to look at a little bit more going forward. But yeah, very happy that I got to try this one. So Delirium and Brouwerij Huyghe have my respects for this beer. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about this one. This was the Barrel Aged Blonde, an 11.5% Belgian strong golden ale aged in bourbon barrels for 9 months from Brouwerij Huyghe in Helle, just outside of Ghent in Flanders in Belgium. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brouwerij Huyghe and the Delirium range as well. And I will no doubt see you guys in another review. So until the next time, Slange, Skål, cheers, Santé, Proust. Check out my social media, check out Delirium and Brouwerij Huyghe's social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange, Skål, and cheers.